Yo, guys, welcome back again today. Today we're going to be talking about Jerry Lawson. Jerry Lawson was born in Brooklyn, New York on December 1st, 1940. His father, Blanton, was a longshoreman, while his mother, Mannings, worked for the city and then the education system. Lawson would grow up in South Jamaica, Queens, housing projects with his brother Michael and his parents. Lawson came from a long line of scientists, with his grandfather being trained in physics. His grandfather did not have the opportunity to practice what he loved due to the institutional racism in the southern part of the United States at the time. So Lawson's grandfather became a postmaster. Lawson's father also fell in love with science, and so Lawson's fascination began. From an incredible young age, he had a technical mind and was very skilled in science. People within his family even stated that he understood the mechanisms of a gear by the age of 3. His parents cared for him very much, and his mother even made it her main focus that Lawson would get a good education. This education opportunity would take him and his mother across the city to PS 50. His mother would go on to use a fake address to get him into a 99% white school and eventually became the PTA president. His mother knew the mind her son had and his will to connect with the world. One day, his mother would buy him a Howcrafters S38 radio, and his fascination in electronics sparked. This radio, which was under $50, was a gateway to Lawson's future. After experiencing the radio, he would go on to build antennas, converters, and many other technologies. He even made walkie-talkies from scratch at the age of 13 and sold to neighborhood kids. This would spark an idea in Lawson to make his own radio station and to escape his environment, where a kid like him was looked at as a lost cause. This would not be easy though. His housing project where he lived would not sign a permit allowing him to apply for an operator's license. So Lawson found a loophole. He found out that a ham radio station transmitting out of a federal housing project did not need permission of management to set up their own broadcast hubs. Lawson would soon get his ham radio license and build a radio station out of his bedroom. Lawson's window had his radio antenna hanging out with chatter of other people's activities from around the world. He would also soon meet a subway motorman at a radio shop he often visited. This man would offer Lawson huge amounts of electronic parts from his garage for free. Lawson would soon go on to start his radio station, and only at 13 years old. Lawson was motivated by the thought of people not believing in him and the perception of impossibility. He saw the world different. He didn't want to do what other kids were doing. He wanted something more. Lawson was confined to the walls of poverty, the walls of his environment, but yet he knew there was more. He would start to spend his Saturdays inspecting tube tests and transistors at electronic stores. This would lead him to building transmitters from scratch, with his only teacher being experienced and not a traditional teacher by his side. Lawson would soon move into high school and worked repairing televisions. The same thing he loved would lead him to his future wife. One day, Lawson went to repair a TV at a customer's house and met his future wife, Catherine. Catherine was at her sister's house that day, and her and Lawson fell in love. Lawson and Catherine would marry in 1965. Lawson would soon after apply for many engineering jobs in New York City, and after working for a couple of years, he and his wife decided they wanted a change. Lawson's vision of the world was technology, and he thought moving to the West Coast where technology companies were booming made a lot of sense. In 1968, Lawson and his wife would move to a small apartment in Silicon Valley. In the late 60s, Silicon Valley in California was in a growth era for emerging technology companies. Microprocessors, transistors, and semiconductors would all lay the groundwork for what we know as the technology capital of the world today. Once Lawson arrived, he would get a job as a field applications engineering consultant for Fairchild Semiconductor. One day, on a consulting job, Lawson would meet a 24-year-old by the name of Alan Alcorn. Alan, at the time, was working for a startup company who only had 3 people. This company was Syzygy, which would eventually become Atari. Alan would go on to make the legendary game called Pong. But before Allen could do that, the startup company Syzygy would call Lawson to their headquarters. This headquarters was a small garage in that area. Lawson was called upon to help Allen with a chip that was needed to develop the first arcade video game called Pong. With Lawson's expertise, Allen was able to design Pong into the first widely known video game. This game was very simple and consisted of 2 flat bars and a ball opponents would hit back and forth on a screen for points. Allen and Lawson would soon become friends, and Lawson would tell Allen stories of him working with radar and imagery back in New York City. Lawson was a breath of fresh air in Silicon Valley, with his laid-back attitude and lighthearted jokes. Like most people in Silicon Valley, Lawson did not have a degree. Soon after Pong was released, Lawson started to work on his own video game, which was operated by coins. He created this video game in his garage and called it Demolition Derby. In 1975, he would complete the game and used a F8 microprocessor from Fairchild. The game would be placed and debuted in a local pizza parlor. In 1977, it was licensed by the Chicago Coin Machine Manufacturing Group, and the game consisted of pursuing cars, drones, and being able to steer. This was all packaged in a compact cabinet. Lawson could have had his own video game empire, but then word of his home project got back to his company at Fairchild, and Fairchild put him on the task of a new project the company was thinking on. Fairchild wanted to move towards consumer products and video games. Fairchild was interested in a small company called Alpex and needed an engineer, such as Lawson, to evaluate the technology to see if it could be converted. Using Fairchild's new F8 microprocessor system versus using the game's current Intel 88 CPU chip. This was the main obstacle to see if Fairchild would partner with Alpex. Fairchild eventually partnered with Alpex and its small team of software and hardware engineers. Alpex at the time hired Lawrence Haskell, a well-versed software engineer, and Kirshner, a hardware engineer. The two set out to create a home console in which users could change to different games and not just play one. The project console was called the Raven. This stood for Remote Access Video Entertainment. This console was set to be pricey and futuristic, but at the time, the small company could not afford to develop it in the way they wanted to. At the time, RAM was around 1 American cent a bit, which was very expensive seeing how much they would need for the system and to mass produce it. Alpex shopped this idea around with huge companies such as RCA and Motorola, but at the time, those companies were just getting out of the vacuum age and did not see the future of home video games. Sometime after, Sean Fogarty, whom worked for Fairchild as a parts rep and supplied Alpex with components, was called by Alpert at Alpex to come visit. Sean, being curious about what Alpex was doing, would agree to take a trip to the East Coast office. Sean, loving what he saw, sent back word to California to Fairchild's Vice President of Consumer Products, Greg Reyes. Greg was extremely impressed with what was shown to him, and he got the ball rolling with the CEO of Fairchild. The CEO would then send Corrigan Landrum, the former head of National Semiconductor's Consumer Products, and Jerry Lawson, the engineer. This was to evaluate the technology and write a report showing the feasibility of partnering with the company as well as marketing for the product. Soon Fairchild would partner with Alpex and its employees. Lawrence Haskell and Kirshner was directed to work with the new company team headed by Lawson and Fairchild. Before Fairchild partnered with Alpex, the two were already working on a home video game console that would let users switch games at will. This was a concept that had plagued the industry for years: how to make video games smaller and more portable. The Magnavox Odyssey was the only home console in the US at the time that would let you play ping pong and other forms of games. This system used jumper cards and tapped on plastic that could be changed on the TV. This would create overlays. Combine that with a physical board and card game. This was at the time the most advanced home gaming system. There were only so many fun games you could play by moving a few dots around the TV screen, and this could be considered as one game with a variation of ways to play it. This was not the answer to playing video games in a small package with ease. Lawson would soon found the project at Fairchild and help work on the new Channel F console. Lawson was so gifted he never took notes. His memory and meanings would be uncanny, with photography like memory. Standing at 6'6", demanding respect, and not scared to speak his mind in meetings, Lawson was someone you would always remember. Lawson was part of a very small club, being an African-American engineer in the sea of white engineers. Heading the project, Lawson would have his hands full with the two new software and hardware engineers from Alpex. Kirshner was very talented and created games such as tic-tac-toe, hockey, and a shooting gallery, while Haskell helped to build Raven as a console prototype on the hardware side. The two engineers even went to Radio Shack and bought little plastic boxes and plugged them into the Raven prototype console with connectors. This was all at Alpex before Fairchild came along with Jerry Lawson. Lawson would help refine the Raven console, which at the time was nothing more than a 16 by 16 by 5-inch metal box filled with circuit boards, a overly complex keyboard, and big game modules. Lawson and his team would help size down the system, made the cartridges to match the standard 8-track tapes, and Lawson even came up with his own idea to replace the keyboard with the gaming joystick he created. He also had to find workarounds for every electrical nightmare that could occur, such as explosions, especially when plugging and unplugging different cartridges. Each cartridge was tested by the Federal Communication Commission, which made the Channel F system the first microprocessor device of any nature to go through FCC testing. Lawson also helped develop a hold button on the console, which for the first time ever let gamers pause and freeze a game. The console would be renamed the Channel F, and the media caught hold of the fascinating machine with 26 individual cartridges. This article would actually alert other companies that were also rushing to make their own cartridge-based consoles. Such companies as Atari would still get the upper hand with action games versus Fairchild's math games and puzzle games. Sales of all the Channel F consoles offered by Fairchild were 350,000 units compared to Atari's 2600 console, which sold millions of units. After this attempt, Fairchild would cut its losses and sold Channel F's tech to Zircon International in 1979. 1 year later, Lawson left Fairchild and founded the first African-American owned video game development company. His company would work on three-dimensional games and invented a special utility cartridge that was used to test color television sets. This utility cartridge was called the Color Bar Generator. During this time, Lawson did not separate his work from personal life. When not at work, Lawson would attend meetings for the Homebrew Computer Club, which included famous figures like Steve Jobs. Lawson had even interviewed some of the future tech giants in the world that were part of the club in the earlier years. He was not impressed enough at the time to give some of them jobs at Fairchild. When at home, Lawson spent almost all of his time with projects and tinkering on things, so much so that he would fall asleep while doing so. What was so interesting was that Lawson had many personal computers in the 1970s, and this was super rare, seeing that almost no one had a personal computer at the time. Lawson had several IBM computers, monitors, a teletype machine, and a PDP-8 12-bit mini computer, which was thought to be the only one on the West Coast. He also had two kids, Anderson and Karen. He was also very adamant about teaching his children how the physical world worked. He would teach them about the future technologies that were coming soon. One example was when Lawson was at the store with his daughter. He told her that the stickers tagged on the food would go away soon and be replaced with barcodes. In the 1990s, Lawson focused most of his energy into mentoring and advising students at Stanford University. Later on, he would go on to focus on writing a book about his life and writing science fiction. He was soon affected by diabetes, lost most of his sight in one eye, and the use of one of his legs, yet he still worked on his projects. Lawson even taught his wife how to solder at a high level. And from 2000 to 2009, Lawson was out of the public view until he was included in a documentary called Freedom Riders of the Cutting Edge. This would lead Joseph Salter, chairman of the International Famed Developers Association Diversity Board, to find out about Lawson. He was shocked he never before heard of Lawson. Joseph would rush to contact Lawson and invited him to the Blacks in Gaming section of the 2011 Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, California. This would mark 40 years of Black gaming history, yet most people did not know who Lawson was. Lawson was honored in 2011 at this conference, but passed away from diabetes just 2 months later. Lawson can be credited with being a huge contributor to the modern game industry, which generates more than $180 billion a year. Just know every time you put a video game in a system, download a game, or play competitive fighting games with joysticks, it might not be possible without Jerry Lawson. So yo guys, today we learned about Jerry Lawson. Amazing man. He was head engineering, head at Fairchild. He oversaw the production and the making of cartridges. The idea was something that was being kicked around the industry before that, but he was the one that helped finalize and build a cartridge that actually worked. He actually built a joystick as well. Joysticks, we use joysticks all the time when you play at arcades, you play competitive fighting games. If you play Street Fighter or any kind of games, use joysticks. And this man just did so much for the gaming industry. He definitely needs to be known, right? And he could definitely be called the father of modern day video games. So yo guys, please like, subscribe down there, turn on your bell notification. Make sure you always subscribe. 70% of people that watch me do not subscribe. So if you like the content, please subscribe, please like, it helps with the algorithm. And add me on all social medias, which is Afric Network, at Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud, Facebook, and Snapchat. Each one teach one. Always learn from each other, always love each other, always be diplomatic with each other. And yo guys, until next time, keep gaming. Peace. One love.